Hello, boys and girls. We are starting Unit 5, which is our Rates and Ratios unit. This is 6-1 from our textbook, which is on ratios. And our learning target for today is I can write ratios in simplest form and determine whether two ratios are equivalent. All right, just a few questions to think about before we get into the lesson would be, what do all of these have in common? So we're looking at these three images here, and we're thinking, what do they all have in common? And how could you describe the relationship between them? Okay, some vocab that we need to make sure we write down in our textbook is the word ratio, which is a comparison of two quantities by division. Okay, so for example, here's some examples here that I would make sure to write down. We're comparing 3 to 4. Okay, and then there's a few different ways to write it. You can write it with the colon in between or as a fraction. And in algebra, we could do the same thing with letters, comparing A to B. Ratios can express part to whole, or whole to part relationships, and are often written as fractions in simplest form. So that's just telling us we could write it as part to part, so like the 3 out of 4, or part to whole, things like that. Okay, so to set up a ratio, here's some things that you need to know. We need to know what numbers are being compared. So when we say like 3 boys out of 5 girls, we're comparing the boys to girls. And we would write this number that are being compared as a fraction. So again, the 3 boys out of 5 girls, we would write it like that. The first item listed is the numerator, and the second item is the denominator. Okay, like I said, 3 boys, that's why it was the numerator. 5 girls, denominator. And then we would write the fraction in simplest form, and 3/5 is already. There's one thing that I want you to note, that when we are writing ratios greater than 1, they are written as improper fractions, not as a mixed number. So if we were to read that the other way, 5 girls for every 3 boys, it would be 5 over 3, and we would leave it like that. All right, so here's some examples for us. Janine has a bag with 3 bouncy balls, 4 marbles, 7 books, and 1 orange. Okay, our first question here asks us, what is the ratio of books to marbles? Okay, so again, based on our steps, we first need to know what numbers are being compared. Well, we are comparing books to marbles. Write the numbers that are being compared as a fraction. The first is the numerator, so books, which is 7. Okay, and the second item is the denominator, which is the marbles, and that is 4. And then write it in simplest form. Well, nothing goes into both 7 and 4, and we want to keep it as an improper fraction, so there is our answer. Number 2, what is the ratio of bouncy balls to marbles? Again, we are comparing bouncy balls to marbles this time. All right, bouncy balls, there are 3. That's our numerator. And the marbles, since that's the second one listed, is our denominator, which would be 4. 3/4 can't be simplified, so we are done. Okay. Now this one, what is the ratio of bouncy balls to the total number of items in the bag? All right, so we are comparing bouncy balls to the total number of items in the bag. Okay, so bouncy balls, there's 3 of them. Now total number, that's including everything. Well, this is 10. This would be 5, so there's 15 total items. So there's 3 out of 15. Now we can simplify this. Both can be divided by 3. So 1/5 would be our answer. All right, here are some to try on your own and then come back. We're looking at field trip information, and we want to write each as a ratio in simplest form. So our first one here is comparing adults to students. I'm just going to kind of zoom. Well, there are 24 adults and 180 students. And then we want to make sure that we write that in simplest form. They can each be divided by 12, which is 2 out of 15. Students to buses, well, there's 180 students, 4 buses. We can divide, this can be simplified, they both can be divided by 4. Now this one, 4 divided by 4 is 1, but we want to keep it because that's telling us there's 45 students per one bus. Okay. Buses to people. Okay, so now buses comes first. Well, there's 4 buses. How many total people are there? So we take 180 plus 24. There are 204 total people. Then when we simplify this, each one can be divided by 4. So we would get 1 out of 51. So that means 1 bus for every 51 people. And then adults to total people. Well, there's 24 adults. And we found out earlier that there's 204 people. Again, we need to make sure we simplify this. It simplifies to 2 over 17. So there's 2 adults for every 17 people. Now, something else that we need to make sure to remember is when we have things like this, 30 seconds to 5 minutes, we need to convert to the same unit since they are both time, but one of them is seconds and one is in minutes. Okay, so I'm going to turn my 5 minutes into seconds. Well, there's 60 seconds per minute, so I would take 5 times 60, which is 300 minutes. Now they are both, 300 seconds. Now they're both in the same form, or in the same unit, so now we can compare them. So we would have 30 out of 300. We can simplify this down to 110. Okay. Same thing goes for this one. So we have 8 ounces to 2 pounds, but they need to be in the same unit. So the pounds, I'm going to convert pounds to ounces, and there are 16 pounds per 1 ounce. So that means I would take 2 times 16, which would give me 32 ounces. Okay, so we now have 8 ounces to the 32, so 8 over 32, they can both be divided by 8, so 1/4. Okay. All right, here's another vocab word for you to write down, equivalent ratios. These are ratios that have the same value. So when we look at 2 ratios, and we need to determine if they are equivalent. So for our first example here, we have 250 miles in 4 hours and 500 miles in 8 hours, and we need to know if these are equivalent. So what we could do, one of the ways, is to write them as a fraction. Again, first number is our numerator, second is our denominator. Okay. Now we could get these both into simplest form and see if they equal each other. So I'm going to divide this one. I know that they can both be divided by 2. 250 divided by 2 is 125 over 2, and that can't be simplified anymore. Now this one, they both can be divided by 4. 500 divided by 4 is 125 over 2. And now we see that these both equal each other, therefore they are equivalent ratios. So yes, they are. Okay. Another way that we could do it, I'm just going to kind of work up on the top here, is we could look for a common multiplier between the two. So when we had the 250 over the 4 hours and the 500 over 8, I notice, well, from here to here, we are multiplying by 2. And from here to here, we are also multiplying by 2. So therefore, since these are both equivalent, or they both are multiplying by the same, then our ratio is equivalent. Okay, so here's one to check. Try it on your own. 2 cups of flour to 8 cups of sugar, and 8 cups of flour to 14 cups of sugar. So I'm going to write them in simplest form. So 2 over 8 and 8 over 14. These both can be divided by 2, which would be 1 over 4. And these can both be divided by 2, which would be 4 over 7. And 1/4 is not equivalent to 4/7, so no, they are not equivalent fractions. And again, if we were to do the other way, 2 over 8 equals 8 over 14. Well, from here to here, we are multiplying by 4, but if we multiply the bottom times 4, we do not get 14, so therefore they are not equivalent. One more to try, a word one problem here. Derek Jeter had 32 hits out of 93 times at bat. And I'm going to say his name wrong. Is it George Posado? Hit 11 hits out of 31 times at bat. Are these equivalent? Well, we're going to put hits over the amount of times at bat. Same thing for the other one. Okay. And now we are going to look they are both in simplest form, going from 31 to 93. I know that that is times 3. So then 11 to 32, that is not multiplying by 3, so therefore these are not equivalent. So no, they are not equivalent ratios. Alright, you can go back and watch any of this video again if you are still a little confused. You can look at the examples in your book or the tutor videos in the online textbook. Otherwise, go ahead, take your 6-1 NICU at this time.